been stripped at one end, and the positive and negative wires were fastened to two harmless-looking pieces of wood, while the other end disappeared into an ordinary 5-litre paint can, the trademark on the lid still clear to see. From experience, born of months of active service, she felt sure that this was no longer filled with paint, but with homemade explosive, laced with lumps of shrapnel, capable of destroying everything and everybody in the vicinity if it went off, starting with her. She lay there and studied the problem now facing her. Under normal circumstances, she would simply have retreated with infinite caution and then detonated it remotely and harmlessly. But in this instance, she knew that was impossible. First, there was Mark and his unexploded bomb to her left, while less than 3 meters away to the right was the wall of one of the last functioning hospitals in Fallujah. She knew she had 2 choices. One was to crawl slowly backwards away from the landmine and take shelter while Mark finished defusing his bomb. She could radio for help, hoping the vibrations of heavy trucks on the nearby road wouldn't trigger an explosion while they waited for the rest of their team to arrive. The other was to attempt to defuse it right here and now with the limited resources at her disposal. However, a sideways glance at the wall of the hospital, behind which she knew were helpless people, confirmed the fact that she didn't really have any choice at all. Taking a deep breath and moving deliberately and carefully, she stretched out her right hand towards the uppermost of the pieces of wood. Red electrical tape showed where the contact had been strapped to this primitive trigger, only separated from the other piece of bare copper wire by a matter of millimeters. The slightest tremor on her part, and the device could explode with devastating results. She lay there for a full minute, doing her best to calm herself, before her training kicked in and she could almost hear her instructor's voice in her ear. "You know what you've got to do, so don't take all day. Just do it, Reed." As delicately as she could, she caught hold of the piece of wood and lifted it up and away from the other half. She set it down very carefully, and then, with her free hand, lifted the plastic lid off the paint can and saw the other end of the cable disappear into the amorphous beige mush that could cause so much carnage. Resolutely, she gritted her teeth and began to pull on the wire until she saw the detonator gradually emerge, an unremarkable little black package with an ordinary Duracell battery taped to the side of it. She disconnected the battery and tossed it away, laid the now disarmed detonator onto the ground alongside her, and finally allowed herself to breathe again. She was just rolling over to give Mark the good news when she heard him scream, the sound now forever burned into her memory. Almost simultaneously, a massive explosion picked her up and threw her against the wall of the hospital, cracking her skull and spraying her with shrapnel. She found out later that this tore a vicious gouge across her right thigh, just missing the main artery. The blast also broke most of her ribs and punctured her lung. They told her that only the fact that the bomb had been buried in the crater had saved her from instant death. Mark didn't stand a chance. The dust slowly began to settle around her, and she lay there, barely conscious, staring in disbelief at the huge hole in the ground where he had been only moments before. Her hands, rock steady up to now, suddenly began to shake. A car in the street outside her window hooted its horn, and the noise broke the spell, tearing her away from her recurring nightmare. But as she opened her eyes, her hands were still shaking. It took her a few moments to get her bearings and realize that she was no longer in Iraq, but safely back home in the UK. It took much longer before the all-too-familiar shaking stopped. Chapter 1.